where did it really begin? For African Americans everywhere, what is the rest of the story? What is our unknown heritage and tradition? I'm Jason Allen Carvel. Please join me for a dramatic story, a proud history of African Americans as key players in the first America.
Before there were dreams of equal freedom in Philadelphia,
the incredible concepts that were written down in the Declaration of Independence were being fought for in Spanish Florida before there is the United States.
This is our history as key players in the first New World.
Africans participated, both free and enslaved, both men and women, in every single Spanish expedition in Spanish Florida.
Why has this story not come out? I would have loved to have heard about it when I was a kid. It would have completely changed my outlook on life.
His name was Pedro Menendez de Aviles, and by 1565, he had been Captain General of the Spanish treasure fleets for 15 years. A powerful man and a confidant of the king, his plan was to come to Florida and establish settlements. He left Spain with 12 ships and made his way to Florida, landing there on September 8th. It was here that he and Spain began the enterprise of Florida and America.
The New World was built by three groups: the Europeans, the Indigenous, and the Africanos. And that without any of those three, this would not have happened.
The first people of African heritage who came to the Americas, both here in the United States and in Latin America, were free. They were soldiers, they were conquistadors, they were sailors and wives.
We do see free Africans who are primarily African seafarers from the early 1400s were utilized by the Europeans to navigate up and down the west coast of Africa.
Africans participated, both free and enslaved, both men and women, in every single recorded expedition since Juan Ponce de Leon's 1513 expedition. Their voices haven't really been heard. And I think it's critical in order to understand 16th century Spanish Florida, to understand the multiple roles that Africans played in this story.
By the late 1600s, the colony of St. Augustine had been in existence for over a century. It was a thriving, multiracial, multicultural society. But this version of Spanish Florida was never supposed to have existed.
The King of Spain created the Edict of 1693, which to my knowledge and other scholars appears to be the first civil rights legislation in the New World. It stated that if you were enslaved on an English plantation, if you could make it to Spanish territory, that you would be given your freedom.
Once they get into La Florida, they're given a choice. You can live in the Florida wilderness, live as a maroon society, as you see fit. They were also given the choice, if you would like to live under Spanish rule, then you could live at Fort Mose.
With the provision that you join the militia, became Catholic, and provided some service.
The first underground railroad runs south.
How do people on a plantation hear that you can find freedom in Spanish Florida?
When you leave the plantation, what are you leaving with? What's on your back? And you are just out there through the grace of God that you can make it.
It was clear by the mid-1700s that once you got to the St. Johns River, then you were good.
They will feel at home because they will see people that look like them being successful, entrepreneurs, farmers, people putting food on their tables, feeling the benefits of their own labor.
When we come back, a colonial war erupts, and the freed slaves fight to preserve their newfound freedom, and the French nuns who would change the fate of post-Civil War slaves.
We came in 1866 at the request of Bishop Augustine. He asked for 8 sisters that would come, and he made it very clear that they were coming to teach the liberated slaves, that would be their work here.
Despite their good works, it wasn't long before the sisters were caught in the rising tide of racial segregation.
It was illegal to teach black people. So there was a lot of animosity about, educating black people, even after the Civil War, even after they were freed. In 1916, 3 of our sisters were arrested.
The struggle for civil rights had reached a tipping point in St. Augustine and throughout America. But no one could have foretold the events that were about to take place.
St. Augustine is merely a symbol or an expression of the tragedies that engulf our whole nation in the area of race relations.
The year is 1964, and protests have reached a fever pitch in St. Augustine.
The scariest night was when the Klans and the others were down in the slave market. They had brought in a truckload of rocks and put it in the slave market so they would have to throw at us.
It was now that Dr. King became personally involved in St. Augustine's struggle.
We are seeking to make this the oldest city in the United States, one of the most democratic cities in the United States.
On June 18th, SCLC associate J.T. Johnson hatched a plan at the Monson Motor Lodge. J.T.'s plan was simple. He asked a friend of the cause, Al Lingo, to check into the hotel. Because Al was white, there were no problems at the front desk. Al then put on his swim trunks and jumped into the hotel pool. The rules allowed guests to invite friends in, so J.T. Johnson and several others waited for the signal and dove in as Al's guests. With several dozen witnesses, sheriff's deputies, and an army of photographers on hand, an enraged James Brock emerged and began pouring muriatic acid pool cleaner into the pool and on the swimmers. This act of wanton hate immediately changed the game.
Our whole foreign policy and everything else go to hell over this. Yesterday in the swimming pool in St. Augustine, they jumped in and police jumped in, their clothes on, they started pouring acid in the pool. I saw that on television.
And then, a mere 2 weeks later, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed into law.
The purpose of this law is simple. It does not restrict the freedom of any American. It does say that there are those who are equal before God shall now also be equal in the polling booths, in the classrooms, in the factories, and in hotels and restaurants and movie theaters.
Join us on a 450-year journey back to the first America. This is America's untold journey.